I was in hiding, right? I was in a place that no one knew, or only extremely trusted people knew where I was. Almost every day on Twitter, on X, I was being tagged by some account. You're gonna be next. My visa's revoked. I'm told to surrender to ICE. I have ICE agents at my house. I got a tip off that FBI and DHS are looking for me. This is all before the hearing. I hear a loud bang and I'm thinking, okay, they're here to get me.
Welcome to the Big Picture Podcast. My name is Mohammed Hassan, and today we speak with Momodou Taal, a Cornell University student who tried to sue the Trump administration to protect himself from arrest and deportation, only to be forced to flee the country. The crackdown by the Trump administration on pro-Palestine activists has continued to intensify despite these legal challenges. Undercover agents belonging to the Department of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE for short, have been filmed arresting university students on campuses, in their homes, and even in the middle of the street. It began with the arrest of Columbia graduate Mahmoud Khalil, a Palestinian student who became one of the faces of Gaza encampments last year, and negotiated with the university on behalf of protesters who were calling on the administration to divest from Israeli companies. Despite being married to a US citizen and also being a green card holder, Khalid was sent to an immigration detention facility in Louisiana and told his residency was revoked and he would be deported. That deportation order was blocked by a judge, though the US government has vowed to pursue the case in higher courts if necessary. Khalil's lawyers have successfully managed to bring Khalil back to New Jersey, where he was first held, hoping that this would allow his case to be heard in front of more sympathetic courts. You may have also seen the chilling video of Turkish graduate student Rümeysa Öztürk being apprehended by masked ICE officers. She was later transferred to Louisiana as well, where many others have also been taken. That footage has ignited a fiery debate in America about whether the right to free speech enshrined in the country's constitution extends to non-citizens, and whether immigration officers should be given sweeping powers to arrest and detain legal residents who haven't committed a crime. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said last week that at least 300 visas had already been revoked by the Trump administration and that deportations would continue.
If you told us, I'm going to America not just to study at your university, but to tear up your campus, we would have never let you in. And if you do that, once you come into the United States, we're going to kick you out. We're going to do that. And I don't care what terrorist organization is supporting, we're going to kick you out.
Some of those targeted as part of this nationwide sweep have attempted to appeal to the justice system. In Cornell University, a group of academics and students launched a legal case against the Trump administration. At its center is the case of Momodou Taal, a British-Gambian PHD student whose home was then raided by ICE agents in an attempt to arrest him. After failing to get a judge to hear their case, Taal decided instead to leave the United States before he faces the same fate as Mahmoud Khalil and Rümeysa Öztürk. Now he says his fight is not yet over. Momodou Taal, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Now, before we begin, I want to ask you where in the world you are right now. Are you in a place where you can share that?
Not currently, not at the moment. I would prefer not to, but the most important thing is that I'm currently safe and I'm not in the United States.
That's good. So then my next question is, why did you decide to leave?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. If I'm being honest with you, the decision to leave was very abrupt. It wasn't like some meticulously planned idea and days in the making. It was very much me and my legal team had a conversation. And then we kind of game planned next steps. And I think it became increasingly clear to me that even with a court order, my safety was not going to be guaranteed. And it did not mean just because the court would rule in my favor that I could now walk around New York City with my head held high and not have the fear of being abducted by or bundled into an unmarked vehicle and then transported thousands of miles away to Louisiana. And I think increasingly we had realized, well, myself included, that the longer we draw this out, the more likely my detention is, and the less likely I would have leverage to negotiate my release. All in all, it became very clear to me that it's kind of the longer I wait, I'm gambling more with my freedom. And I think I took a decision and said, you know what, I think I've made a political point I've made, and I'm ready to kind of just leave at this moment.
Because of course this wasn't your first course of action. You and some of the other faculty members at Cornell attempted to take this case to the courts, to the legal route, to pressure the Trump administration into backing down. What was the moment when you decided that, okay, for me, I'm probably better off to leave? Was there a specific incident or event that happened that made you think that going through the court system wasn't necessarily going to protect you right in this moment?
I can't say one specific moment, but what I can say, there were instances where I was, for example, with Ramesa, for example, even though the court ordered her not to be removed and the habeas, she's in Louisiana. Mahmoud as well, he's not in New Jersey. And increasingly, I don't know if I also saw as well, an administrative error took a Latin American person to El Salvador. This person has no affiliation with gangs. And I'm thinking increasingly, and then the government's briefing said that we cannot locate this person anymore, or we don't know how to bring them back. So I thought to myself, it's either El Salvador, Guantanamo Bay, or my freedom at this point. And I think it was, yeah, so it wasn't like a one thing, but I think as I was seeing the flagrant disregard of the Trump administration to the courts, and we're in a time where we're seeing the president of the United States attack judges and the court legal system alongside Elon Musk on Twitter, on X. So I think given I was kept seeing the increasing lawlessness of the Trump administration, it was convincing me and pushing me towards the decision that I made quite last minute.
And of course, I assume that you, like the rest of us, were watching the footage that comes out. You know, you mentioned Rumeysa, the video of her getting detained on the side of the street by ICE agents, I think sent a chill down the spines of a lot of people watching it. And I'm sure you were looking at that and picturing yourself in that position. What were those moments, what those weeks in between finding out that these agents were coming, essentially trying to find you and making that decision to leave? What was your life like in that period of time?
Yeah, I haven't really spoke about this publicly, but it was, I was in captivity, right? I had not seen sunlight for like 2.5 weeks. I was in hiding, right? I was in a place that no one knew, or only extremely trusted people knew where I was. I was in Ithaca, but I was somewhere where no one knew where I was. No one could get to me either. It was, and again, just like at a practical level, an emotional level, I hear a loud bang and I'm thinking, okay, they're here to get me. I hear someone speaking too loudly and I'm thinking, my body starts thinking, they're here to get me. My sleep was terrible in those 2.5 weeks. My appetite, I lost my appetite in that time. It was really an intense period of time. It really was intense. It really was a moment of being so unsure what could happen at any moment that I wasn't. I had to start thinking about my safety in ways that I had never thought about it before, and it really hit home the material consequence of what it means to be pro-Palestinian in the United States in this moment. And that was the beginning of my thought process. And I can say, this is not to kind of in any form take any credit or big myself up, but I would say up until my decision to leave, I can say hand on heart, I did not think about myself. It was very much I thought about the movement. I thought about others, international students. I thought about, obviously centering Palestine and Gaza, and I still do. But I think at the moment I took my decision to leave, or like in the run up to that decision, a few hours before, it started to become a different calculation of, okay, let me think about myself in this moment. And let me think about what does self-preservation in this moment look like. And then I took the decision to leave.
When you decided that you were going to take part in this legal challenge to the Trump administration, did you expect, or were you worried that this was going to put a bigger target on your back as a result?
In terms of a target, I think it's could become clear, and the courts and the government has said this as well in their briefing, I was on their list. I mean, given my high profile nature of my suspension in September of 2024, the New York Post talked about deporting students, and they only named me in the article. Beta, Canary Mission, so many others kept naming me. If almost every day on Twitter, on X, I was being tagged by some account. You're gonna be next. So, for example, people would say you're gonna be deported when the executive orders were signed. After that, when Mahmoud was taken, I'd get tagged. You're going to be next, right? So I don't think I think I was ready within people's minds, especially the Zionists' minds, about for deportation. What I can say is I did not anticipate the retaliatory measures the government took and the lies they told. The government said all of a sudden, "Oh, this is not retaliation. We were going to deport you the day before you filed your lawsuit." And I want to say the week of me filing the lawsuit, even before the hearing has been done, my visa is revoked. I'm told to surrender to ICE. I have ICE agents at my house. I got a tip off that FBI and DHS are looking for me. This is all before the hearing, right? All forms of intimidation, and this was retribution for filing the lawsuit. So yes, Target was maybe I can say I accelerated the process, but it's clear they were going to come for me.
I want to read you something that the Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in response to this wave of arrests and detentions of students like yourself. He said, quote, "If you told us I'm going to America not just to study at your university, but to tear up your campus, we would have never let you in." Those are strong words, and I wonder, when you hear them, what do you make of a statement like that?
First and foremost, Marco Rubio, it would be good for him to remember how his own country, how his own family arrived in the United States, fleeing the Batista regime in Cuba. I think he'll be good to remember that. And secondly, also, that I would say, yeah, I did intend to study and finish my PhD at Cornell University. I did not also anticipate a genocide to start. I did not anticipate that the United States would be more than just complicit, but facilitate and arm a genocide. If a condition of your visa is now contingent upon having no moral conscience, then the United States can keep their visas, and they have lost many students and will continue to lose the best people who come to the United States. So I think, I don't take these words seriously. I don't even believe he's acting on his own behalf. These people, we know the Israeli lobby is powerful in the United States, and they have these politicians in their back pockets. So I'm under no false impression that Marco Rubio is even acting entirely or by himself.
There's this argument that is taking place across the United States right now about the First Amendment, the freedom of speech enshrined in the Constitution of the United States, and whether it applies or extends to people that are or were in your position, people on visas, people on green cards, or whether this is solely restricted for U.S. citizens. And I know that when the encampments first started across campuses, such as Cornell's last year, there were a number of students that were supportive of the encampments, but had to decide whether or not they wanted to take part and risk their visas getting revoked or risk their scholarships getting taken off them. For you and for others like you, I'm sure you knew others that were in similar positions to you. How difficult was it to make that decision? Did you have a feeling that if I took part in these protests, then maybe at one point in time, my own education might be at risk?
Two things. So the argument regarding the First Amendment is an important one. The First Amendment reads persons. It does not say citizens. And several lawyers, attorneys, judges, even at the level of the Supreme Court, has declared that it applies to non-citizens. If you are in the United States of America, you have First Amendment protections. That's the law. People can narrowly try to define it to exclude certain speech they don't like, and we already know there's a Palestine exception. but that's how the law is read. In terms of the encampment, again, it wasn't a difficult decision. I think my personal kind of choices and decisions were always led by what I was seeing in Gaza and the death and destruction. I had to do something, whether my efforts were in vain, whatever the outcome. I had to do something, and with the Columbia crescendo moment of the encampment, we had to make sure that we cannot allow Gaza to become background noise. We must refuse genocide. I think the crime of all crimes, we cannot allow that to become normalized. And anything that was going to contribute to the ideological struggle, to the material struggle of divestment, to any form of contributing to the Palestinian liberation struggle, I had to be a part of that, and I wanted to be a part of that. So I think it wasn't very difficult to make a decision for me. I know people were scared, and rightfully so. If you're asking, did I connect the encampment to this moment now of me leaving the country so abruptly? Then no, of course, I didn't foresee that. But at the moment, in that moment, I made the right decision of being involved and I have no regrets.
Now, tertiary institutions, especially those in the United States, have a history of campus activism, campus protests. Were you shocked? Were you surprised by the way that administrations of universities like Cornell reacted to the encampments last year?
I would say I was disappointed but not shocked when it comes to university administrations. Because I think, on one hand, these are the same universities that claim to honor academic freedom, intellectual inquiry, free speech. But when it comes to Palestine, that goes out the window, further reifying what we have come to understand to be the Palestine exception. And um, I also did not anticipate the universities engaging in that level of repression and collaboration. The universities essentially handed their students off to be slaughtered, like lamb to be slaughtered. All right. So I guess that's very disappointing. And I don't know if universities can recover in this time. I think damage has been done for a generation to these universities. And I think the only way they can come back is by refusing to capitulate to Zionism, by refusing to normalize genocide, and actually upholding what it means to be producing people of moral conscience. So I mean, I don't have a lot of faith in the institutions because I think fundamentally they act as businesses more than academic institutions. But I think if they're going to be salvaged, then they have to change course immediately.
This targeting of university students, specifically pro-Palestine activists, was something that Donald Trump campaigned on during the election. It has now become a very central and very public part of their policies. What do you think the president and his administration gains from this wave of arrests and deportations?
It's a distraction fundamentally. The country is not doing great. America, United States of America is on the decline economically. A multipolar world is emerging. America can't do anything to stop it. I think these things are distractions, but also fundamentally, we're seeing the re-entrenchment of, I know people like to use this word a lot, but I think it is, America has been fascist for a very long time. But I think increasingly we are seeing the re-entrenchment of this fascism that if you critique US foreign policy, if you critique Israel specifically, then you are not long welcome in the United States. You are deemed as a threat. You are deemed as a threat to the United States and to the public good, which I think what's deeply worrying and concerning. You probably have more right to critique the United States within the United States than you can critique Israel, which I think is anyone in the United States should be deeply concerned about that because I thought MAGA was Make America Great Again, not Israel first. But yeah, so I think fundamentally what they get to stand to gain from this is fear, stoking within people to think twice about critiquing the government or critiquing US foreign policy.
When it comes to this movement that we saw spring out of campuses all across the United States last year, including a lot of Ivy League universities like Cornell, places where people would not have expected such fevered and strong pro-Palestine movements to stem from. And when you look at the polls in the United States and, you know, to your point, the support that the U.S. exerts to Israel, especially in this time, especially with the war it's waging in Gaza, is deeply unpopular among young people. And it's so unpopular that it became a major election time issue last November. There is an attempt now by Trump and the White House to shut down this movement, especially on campuses. And I wonder what you, as somebody who took part in organizing, was deeply invested in these movements, what do you think about where the future of this movement, of this generation is, especially given the fact that the war in Gaza continues as we speak?
Yeah, Zionism has lost. And I know we are seeing the death and destruction, so it's very difficult to say this in a moment. But in terms of the ideological struggle, I think Zionism has lost. I think it has done irreparable damage to itself. I can never see it reconstitute itself. I can never see it be salvaged because people around the world, young people particularly, the generation of TikTok, they understand what Zionism is, right? Even a majority of young Jewish folk don't agree what's happening in Israel's actions in Gaza. So I think fundamentally we have won the ideological struggle, and it's only a matter of time before we win the material one. So I think for me, this moment is, as I've said yesterday, Palestine is an extremely clarifying moment. It exposes the liberal Western order. It exposes so many contradictions and heightens them as well. But fundamentally, I think when it comes to I think Zionism is over and finished. And I think that is in part, of course, with what the resistance on the ground has done in Palestine, but also those of us who have continued to wage struggle in the global north as well within the imperial core, through our teachings, rallies, raising awareness, etc. But I think the ideological struggle has been won by the pro-Palestinian camp. And I don't think we're ever going back to what we went before. And I think, secondly, it's not a position of strength that you enact such repression in terms of to suppress an ideology. It's actually a position of weakness. Because what I think the United States has recognized and the Zionists have recognized in Israel is that they have lost the ideological struggle. I think they've recognized that they can no longer have wholesale buying to their project, and now the only way to enforce their project is to violently suppress and repress and enact all untold horrors onto peoples. So I know people can know some sounds almost like counterintuitive, always seeing death and destruction, but Zionism has lost. No, it's a position of weakness that they're operating from in this moment.
And finally, Momodou, what happens to you now? What do you plan on doing now that you're outside the US when it comes to your research, your PhD, but also when it comes to this case that you were a part of against the Trump administration?
I think first and foremost, I'm going to get some well-deserved rest and try and process and decompress. I fully intend to finish my PhD. I hope to do so remotely. So far, so good, provided Cornell don't change their mind. And the case has been dropped. We dropped the case. This was the decision of the legal team and the co-plaintiffs. But again, there's so many cases right now regarding the executive orders. One of them will end up in the Supreme Court, and we will get a final ruling on what the position is on executive orders. I think I'm just extremely happy to have played any part of any kind of role in that process. And I'm just extremely happy that I was able to continue mentioning Palestine at a national, international level. And again, once again, I have no regrets. So thank you.
Mamodou Taal, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Big Picture, and thank you to Momodou Taal for being our guest today. You can listen to this episode and all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts from. And until next time, my name is Mohammed. Salam.